is happening around the world in the wake of the war in Iran that began a little over a week ago. And so much is happening, and it's not exactly clear how it's all connected. All of a sudden you read that Israel is occupying parts of southern Lebanon, killed a priest last night. Really? What is that? Is that true? You read that there are power outages in Bangladesh. Bangladesh? Yes. Asia is suffering. The world is suffering due to the choke point of Hormuz, the Straits of Hormuz, that are closed or semi-closed by Iran and have been since this began. And that's causing massive downstream effects in markets, in manufacturing, in the global economy. How long is that going to last? What's the end game there? And then, of course, the war itself, which is playing out in Iran and Israel and throughout the Arab world, really, primarily in the Gulf states, but not just the Gulf states. What's the damage? Well, the truth is, in a lot of cases, we don't really know, because the censorship of this war on social media, and of course, the big mainstream outlets are censored, always have been. But the promise of social media was you could get unmediated information. You could get videos live from the scene. And now suddenly you can't. That lasted about 24 hours before the clampdown. And in part, that was by governments of the Gulf states. They don't want physical destruction of their countries broadcast to the world. The government of Israel has clamped down completely. They don't want videos of Tel Aviv or Haifa burning. You can, in fact, in some of these countries, go to jail for posting that stuff online. But it's not just the governments of those countries that are imposing censorship. It's the social media companies here that are imposing censorship on the American people who are paying for all of this. So they can't know. And then there does seem to be a kind of censorship practiced by the U.S. government around casualties and deaths. How many people have died so far in this conflict? How many have been injured? Where and under what circumstances? Now, these are sensitive questions in any conflict. And of course, you don't in any way want to degrade the effectiveness of the U.S. military. You don't want to dispirit the troops whom we are rooting for sincerely, always and everywhere, rooting for Americans in whatever theater, in whatever war. It wasn't of their choosing. In some cases, they are just the people who suffer first and most due to the decisions of politicians. So we're always on their side, and you don't want to make things worse for them. On the other hand, Americans do have, on a fundamental level, a right to know the effects of this war on their countrymen. If Americans are killed, we have a right to know that. And yet there's some indication that we really don't. So as you try to figure out what's going on, keep in mind you can't really get the full picture because of the clampdown on information. And so in the conversation that we're about to have, we're going to go through what we think we know. In some cases, we might be wrong. Just want to be honest about that up front. Very hard to know what the truth is at this stage, really at any stage, but particularly in the face of this kind of censorship. But we're going to try to be as honest as we possibly can and provide as much information as we possibly can, given the limitations, because this war matters, maybe more than most wars. This war hasn't been settled. Clearly, there are parties who would like to settle it, but no one person is in charge of whether it gets settled. Israel is a partner in this war, probably the first war the United States has ever fought with a true partner with decision-making authority. It's very different from going into Afghanistan with a NATO coalition. Norway didn't have veto power over anything, but Israel does. And so it's complex, very complex, and the Iranians have their own, of course, completely different agenda. So it may not be settled anytime soon. We're praying that it is. But more fundamentally, this is a different kind of war. So over the course of our lifetimes, most wars the United States has fought, all of them really on some level wars of choice. The U.S. hasn't been invaded really since 1812. So all of these are wars that the U.S. government decided to become involved in or start. And pretty much all of them were initiated on the same pretext, which is we are preserving the order of the world, the international order, the rules-based order, whatever you want to call it. We're preserving the way things are. And this country we're going to war with violated the rules. Therefore, we're going to war to restore the rules. That is not what we're watching now. There's some evidence that the president of the United States, Donald Trump, thought that's what this was about. Iran wants to get nukes. They can't have nukes. We can't have more nuclear proliferation. You can't have rogue states with nuclear weapons. Weapons of mass destruction are bad. Got it. We've heard that before. course, the effect of this will be to radically accelerate proliferation around the world, because what's the lesson of what we're doing right now? You better have nukes or else you're going to get regime changed. No one's trying to regime change North Korea because they have nukes. So the incentive for every small but reasonably wealthy country, as of right now, is get nukes as quickly as you can, because you're going to get regime changed if you don't, potentially. And if you're a bystander to a war and happen to get caught up in it, like the Gulf states are right now, no one is going to protect you. These security guarantees, formal and informal, are not real. Downtown Dubai can still get destroyed and your economy destroyed for a generation, because who's going to stop it? You're on your own. So countries that feel they're sincerely on their own have every incentive to have the most effective deterrence possible, and that would, at this point, be nuclear weapons. So you're going to see a lot more nuclear-armed states in the next few years, without question. So if the point of this was to preserve the status quo on nukes, it had the opposite effect. But the point of this was not to preserve the status quo at all. It was to overturn the status quo, to usher in a new age. That's the point of this war. This is a pivot in history, and a lot of the people supporting it know that. Now, they're really in two groups. One are people motivated by religious impulse. That would include some Israelis, some religious Jews, not all, but some. And that would include some Christians, Christian Zionists. And both groups believe that they're helping to accelerate the end of history. Armageddon, the end of time, the return of the Messiah,